Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to Mr. Bruno for his wonderful introduction. Today, I will present the budget response from Team Unity Dominica, which is entitled A Tough Road to Recovery. We ended 2022-2023 budget, our response as follows. Let's get back to basics. It's time to re-establish the building blocks of the Dominican community and society. The wise use of money and other resources will propel our people to heights unknown. And if only we had a government which was able to selflessly manage our unique placement on the globe, Dominica and Dominicans could be the envy of the world in less than a generation. But it starts here and now with the idea of Otalaja, our budget idea for 2022-2023 fiscal year. And right now, it's a 2023-2024 fiscal year. Otilajala, where is it? Fellow Dominicans, before I begin presenting TUD's response to Dominica's 2023-24 national budget addressed by the Honorable Minister of Finance, Economic Development, Climate Resilience and Social Security, Dr. Irving McIntyre, allow me to take care of some housekeeping matters first. Team Unity Dominica, TUD, treats the business of governance of the island of Dominica seriously. This is why, against all odds, TUD opted to participate in the Dominica general election of December 6, 2022, just 2 months following our movement's formation. Fellow Dominicans, when the team of 5 candidates and I, which I was honored to lead, contested the last election, our participation was symbolic, a symbolic defense of Dominica's democracy. Brothers Jason Fountain, Jason John Baptist, Ian Roll, Lyndon Peters, and I are all recorded as having participated in our island's election, and this action will be analyzed by future Dominicans for what it truly meant: defiance in the face of sure defeat in the interest of our country, not TUD. In fact, it has never been about us. It has been, it now is and will always be about you. This is the pledge so aptly stated in TUD's constitution. I wanted to mention the last election because this was an historic occasion when our country slid lower in the political ditch and almost to the point of no return. But there is hope. Team Unity Dominica is that hope and will continue to keep that beacon of hope glimmering. I ask of you, my fellow brothers of Dominica, our blessed land, in the words of our King Scrunter, hold on, Dominicans, hold on. The opponents of TUD's responsible, strategic, and progressive approach to electoral politics would like to have you believe that TUD is not toeing the line. And that is true, we're not. But who toes the line when we can be that line? We believe that our team is the only lifeline to a nation now in economical, social, moral, spiritual, and political despair. Ours is a voice in the wilderness, but we have the firm belief that the message of hope will meet the people who one day will react. In fact, brothers and sisters of Dominica, you have already heeded our message. Over 100 patriots turned out at the polls to vote for our team, and this is over 100 more votes that we had before the elections. We thank you. We thank you because TUD did not campaign. We did not earnestly contest. No money, no major meetings. We only had faith and dared to place our team on the ballot. Those of you who voted for TUD indeed voted for our country's democracy. We thank you on behalf of the future generations of Dominica, 100+ votes was indeed a gigantic baby step towards progress. It was not about winning or losing for TUD. It was about standing up against the will of one party, to control our people through a plan that will hurt future generations. Fellow Dominicans, we knew that we would not have won and that we would be soundly defeated, but we persevered. Let me again share the concession statements which I wrote ahead of the 2022 general elections. Fellow Dominicans, this is significant. Our concession was written even before the first ballot was cast. And in a democratic election, do you know what this is? Fellow Dominicans, we do not have a fair system for elections. Everyone, everywhere knew that before the election will call, what the results would have been. Magwisa. How can this be fair? So here is a reminder of my concession statement. I said then, and I will still say now, that results of elections cannot and should not be predetermined in a thriving democracy. And to concede before a vote is cast confirms that our democracy is unhealthy and it needs urgent attention. I said that Team Unity Dominica, TUD, decided to contest so that our voice could be added to the growing chorus, which is demanding for electoral reform. And we still stand for this today. Imagine that snap elections were called while we were waiting patiently on the reports of Sir Dennis Byron, who had been actively working on a report for electoral reform recommendations. We hoped that Sir Byron's report would all but ratify the other recommendations, other ideas, observations, suggestions, and conclusions offered by Dominican professionals, agencies, the Commonwealth, the CARICOM and OAS electoral observer missions, which have advised that urgent and obvious changes be made to our country's electoral processes. But alas, he did not. The report is in, and in my view, if certain recommendations of Sir Byron's report are implemented, the spirit of unfairness with the system would have been formally legalized and could irreparably hurt our democracy. In my concession statement, we pledge to embrace the opportunity to keep working for the people of Dominica. The people of Dominica who have largely lost hope in an election system that was designed to give us hope. I said then, and I will say now, that the journey to help preserve our island's democracy and proud legacy of peace and freedom has only just begun. And we should fight on with a united set of purpose. So let the fight continue. This is why I have titled this budget response, The Journey to Economic Recovery. Fellow Dominicans, the journey to save Dominica's economy has gotten even more difficult with the pronouncements made by the Honorable Minister of Finance, Economic Development, Climate Resilience, and Social Security, Dr. Irving McIntyre. His presentation, a summary, clearly suggests that the Dominican government is on a rapid nationalization campaign. I read a post by Danger Dane Smalling, who reacted to the budget presentation as follows. This is what happens when a country has no opposition. There is nothing else that I wish to add to this, other than to say, I wish to those who refused to stand up for the people during the last election made a serious miscalculation, one that is already hurting the nation. Fellow Dominicans, this is the most painful Dominican budget since our nation's independence, and it was delivered by a minister who is enjoying the most resounding political majority in our country's modern history. This is one of the consequences of 19-2, a 19-2 electoral majority, and I have a feeling that the worst is still to come. It was simply a poor decision to allow that much power in one hand. This is why this journey to restore Dominica's economy is going to be harder with one party in the power structure of our country's government. We inch closer to the brink of government's total control of the people's destiny. Again, it was a terrible idea to allow so much power in the government's hand. Of course, when I say the government, some may wish to say that the Dominican government is the Honorable Prime Minister, but I disagree. The government comprises of elected and appointed members on the majority and on the minority side as well of the House of Representatives. The members of the government majority are complicit at varying degrees with the nationalization of or government takeover of the productive, private, financial, economic, and other leading sectors of our country. Those charged with the solemn responsibility of representing the people, both in government and out, fail to stand up for Dominica. They are also complicit. It is true that the head of government and the party he or she represents generally holds influence over government's operations. And this is probably more so in the Dominican context. But we, all of us, have or probably have responsibility to do something about our Prime Minister's ambitions. We still can. Because as my grandmother used to say, you never cry die before you die. Fellow Dominicans, we have seen our government take control over elderly care and in the process moving from a community-based cooperative support initiative to a partisan symbolic idea. Government has monopolized the help for the needy and social welfare subsistence. Their 2022 revamped housing revolution suggests that they are interested in influences mortgage decisions. Government has monopolized the entertainment sector through exclusive arrangements with artists and musicians. They have now reframed how people receive national awards, to the point where many believe it is mainly supporters of the ruling regime who have received national awards in recent times. The government dictates who receives emergency relief in an ad hoc manner. The government has essentially taken over the funeral business, yes, the funeral business, through its initiative of assisting with the burial of selective citizens, those supporters and or their family members. Government has crossed boundaries into the domains of the private sector with its economic programs to the point where today our government has threatened the imposition of hefty fines to financial enterprises. Fellow Dominicans, while it is the government doing all of the previously mentioned actions and more, one person seems to be the government poster man. This is why some may say that we have a one-man government, OMG, one-man government. While it is true that there are countries where one man controls the affairs of state, I am not yet prepared to accept that we are existing in a one-man dictatorship in Dominica. I say so because of the cries of dissent, which are generally still being ventilated, and the fact that our country is still listed as a democracy. With the unfairness experienced during the last election, especially the most recent one, serious questions are rightfully raised over the health and state of Dominica's democracy. Let me reiterate If Byron's reform proposals are implemented, this could pave the way for the one-man government, OMG. After all, it is one man who commissioned the report, and it appears that is that same man's arguments which have been drafted into the commissioner's proposed draft. But this may not necessarily happen because we note the possible changing of the guards with this budget address presentation, and if the leadership of Dominica's government indeed changes hands, the me alone can do it mentality, me alone, of our present leader must be abandoned if government is to grow beyond its present stagnant stage. It will take a lot more to move the current government into a more progressive direction. Even if there is a chance of the government's leader being changed, it will be more daunting if the present leader continues. Dominica can do with a regime change because government's job is to create an environment for people and industries to thrive, not to hijack our will to survive, and seek to direct, influence, limit, or politically dictate citizens' free will and preferred means of progress, as the current government is doing. Government cannot decide what our inheritance should be, and instead should provide support for our dreams. A TUD government will operate differently. We will liberate the people. We are convinced that TUD has a reasonable plan to rescue our nation, but it will take all of us working together to achieve this. Indeed, TUD was the only party to release a manifesto in the last general election, and we were the only alternative party to offer a detailed and reasonable response to the 2022-23 budget presentation. Our 2022-2023 budget presentation response was titled Ota Laja, meaning plenty money, and most of what was presented then is applicable now. In our last budget response, it was announced, and I quote, the first initiative would be undertaken in the next fiscal year is the passage of the CARES Act. The CARES Act would pave the way for the formation of political action committees, PACs, which will assist in the funding of social projects. What we heard from the Honorable Minister in his 2023-2024 budget presentation is tax, tax, and more tax. The Citizen by Investment, CBI, and taxes are the leading revenue earners in an economy that will need much more than passport sales and taxes in order for it to remain buoyant. There is a common saying, and not by me, but I need not say who. If not CBI, then what? The answer is answers are rather simple, and I will present a few. 1. Support for and greater investment in small businesses. Rebuilding the agricultural sector and procuring guaranteed markets for export of products through the region and around the world. The promotion, as if on the food item, the promotion and export of cultural products and services. Now we have Asa Banton, we have Triple K, we have Signal Band, we have Michael Henderson, Ophelia, and I don't want to leave whatever, but these are just examples of what I'm referring to. In point number 4, the augmenting of the one-way aid with China and other donor countries with trade. So they give us, we give them. The creation of technological entrepreneur endeavors. And point number 6, meaningful state support for youth enterprises and development. A refocus on agriculture, horticulture, pisciculture, that means the farming of fish for export. Point number 8, manufacturing, agro-processing. Number 9, the creation of a new eco-hospitality and new age tourism initiative through the restructuring the traditional tourism products to include a fused nature, medic, sports, and entertainment cultural tourism product which would be second to none in the world. Point 10, investment in sustainable renewable energy. A bold exploration into matters of aeronautics and scientific discoveries. The creation of an intelligent life and/or artificial intelligence industry. Fast track the establishment and support of new and different kinds of industries. These are just a handful of ideas, well, a little more than a handful, which could be the answer to our country's economic woes. We are not saying that any of this can automatically replace the CBI, especially with the great neglect policy of the government. The idea is, if government had invested in a few of these ideas which we presented last year, we would not be in this predicament when everything is based on CBI, based on an over-reliance of CBI, I might add. Fellow Dominicans, the secrecy behind the CBI's operation suggests that less than savory activities have occurred which have impacted the program's credibility. It would therefore be remiss of me not to mention the United Kingdom visa requirement imposition of Dominican citizens. This is as a direct result of serious concerns over the citizenship by investment programs and was driven by the significant and sustained increase in asylum applications submitted by citizens in the UK. The response of Dominica's Prime Minister confirms this concern, and he pledges government determination to change the structure of this and management of the CBI to include the implementation of additional measures to strengthen the program. Some would argue that this is a little late, but I honestly wish the government and all people well. A collapse of the CBI program at this stage would spell danger for our nation. And if we were in government today, as was pledged in our 2022 election manifesto, the CBI would have already been completely restructured. This is easy to do. Government simply has to terminate all revenues into government's coffers with full and complete transparency, and the framework of the CBI should be determined by the civil servants and known to every Dominican. Under a TUD government, citizens by investment, CBI would mean that one becomes a citizen by investing in the life of the nation, and the passport vending agency which has overridden the CBI would be immediately halted. TUD would also design investment initiatives around information technologies, new business enterprise, agriculture, education and entertainment, health and wellness, security and national defense. This is where we should begin, and other embellishments would follow. Now that these burning issues are out of the way, let me focus on the budget. Firstly, the fact that the 2023-2024 budget sounds like the 19 budgets before. It suggests that nothing has changed in the government's plan. If nothing has changed, there continues to be little or no hopes in achieving what Dominicans really need. Jobs, financial independence, the ability to fend for themselves and their families, the opportunity to dream big and make progress. Governmental support, which is devoid of partisan favoritism, and peace of mind to thrive on the homeland. Based on what was presented in the 2023-2024 budget, none of this is possible. Instead, our government finds it plans to fleece Dominica's financial organizations who have no choice, if government persists, but to pass down the cost to we, the people. Fellow Dominicans, when corporations are taxed, people pay for it. Whilst it is true the salaries are projected to be increased in certain sectors, this increase is hardly enough to compensate for the massive rise in cost of living in Dominica. In fact, the government is taxing the people at a percentage much higher than the meager increases it promises to deliver on wages. This is not how it should be. This is not how it should be done. The need to generate or introduce new capital or revenue streams into the Dominican economy. Taxation is not a fix. Speaking about taxation, allow me to read a statement from the Dominica Cooperative Societies League Limited, DCSLL, which was published on June 28th, just 5 days after the budget presentation by Dominica's Minister of Finance. In his address, the minister warned of government's intention to enforce a licensing requirement on credit unions, which in our opinion would seriously injure the institutions. We are happy that the institution has reacted so swiftly and forcibly to the threat. In fact, the response by the DCSLL strengthens our argument. The DCSLL statement reads as follows, and I quote, "The Dominica Cooperative Societies Limited, the apex body for cooperatives in Dominica, is very concerned about the government's stated intention to impose an astronomical credit union licensing fee as per its 2023 budget address. Whereas the DCSLL recognized government's authority to enforce prescriptions of the law, the stated fee structure will have grave impact on the growth, sustainability, and viability of this homegrown credit union movement. This fiscal measure requiring credit unions to pay a license fee, which is akin to a tax on the assets, is a crippling blow to the credit unions' efforts to recover from Tropical Storm Erika, Hurricane Maria, the COVID-19 pandemic, the IFRS 9 adoption, and the incidence of high non-performing loans. This is especially critical given the important role credit unions play in cushioning the harsh impact of these events. It is also important to note that none of the territories of the OECS and the wider CARICOM region has pursued this course of action, even in light of the prevailing economic challenges. The DCSLL vehemently opposes this fiscal measure, which is anti-growth and which stands to have a detrimental impact on credit unions. This draconian measure, which will take substantial resources out of the hands of credit union members, both locally and in the diaspora. The League is therefore calling on the Minister of Finance to rethink this policy measure. While credit unions are not immune to the strong economic headwinds which face our country, taxing credit unions' assets cannot be seen as a viable alternative to correcting fiscal challenges. It is important to reiterate that no other country in the CARICOM regions charges any levy, license, or tax of this magnitude on cooperative credit unions, unquote. Fellow Dominicans, this is required reading. That is why I have elected to present a great chunk of the statement in this budget response. The statement ends as follows, quote, "The DCSLL therefore implores the government to consider a more enabling and inclusive framework for the future growth of the movement, and we avail to meet with the Minister of Finance at the earliest opportunity to discuss more viable and equitable alternatives," unquote. I applaud the credit union movement, the DCSLL, and our people as we continue to rise with righteous indignation against this move, which would hurt the credit unions and the citizenry as a consequence. The government behaves as if it recently got into power for the first time and had inherited a terrible financial situation. The truth is, the current government has been in office since January 31st, 2000. and the Honorable Prime Minister has been in that job for almost 20 of those years. Fellow Dominicans, there can be no excuses for government's inability to effectively govern. Performance? Yes, there has been a setback or two. But this government has had all the opportunities and overwhelming support of the people to have done better by the people. This budget will hurt the country more than help it. It's like a plaster on a wound that needs stitches. Fellow Dominicans, our country is on rough waters and may go under if this continues and the government is allowed to have its way. It is high time that the government realizes that the game is over and their 2022 election restart was a kickstart of a dead battery. The last bit of power remaining in that old, dead, restarted battery is about to expire. It is time for a real restart, a new battery, one that will energize Dominica to the future, but we will deal with that at the next general elections. Fellow Dominicans, TUD called for a restart of the restart in a January 2023 press release. We declared that any restart needs to focus on the management of the moral fabric of our society, the procurement of jobs for the people, the protection and promotion of the middle class, the elevation of the people away from the notion of mendicancy and dependence, the creation of a more tolerant Dominican society where our differences are celebrated. It was further stated we should pause and reset the button on the country's progress by empowering the people. Our team is prepared to be part of any progressive conversation with the view to addressing the decay in our society. We are still willing to assist, and we hope that the government will become more inclusive. Fellow Dominicans, if the government has borrowed some of the ideas listed in our 2022-2023 budget response, there would have been no need for the new punishing taxes on the private sector and the people as a consequence. The Honorable Minister of Finance could not be more contradictory when in one breath he claims to understand the value of collaboration with the private sector to leverage the strength of both parties to achieve common goals, which would rebound to benefits in increased employment, economic growth, and innovation. And in the other breath, he decides that all credit unions which qualify to operate under the Cooperative Societies Act, Chapter 7803 of the 2017 Revised Laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica must obtain a license to operate, and that the license will be renewable annually on or before December 31st every calendar year for the following year. How is this promoting collaboration and the achievement of common goals? Fellow Dominicans, all the credit unions are affected by this levy. Government is threatening to collect $10,000 from credit unions with assets below $25,000 to as much as $100,000 from credit unions whose assets are $500 million and above. It is like government has gone to shop on our credit unions and the people indirectly. Is this innovation? The people will answer that question at the right time, but for now, TUD is placing our disagreement and disappointment with government's punitive action against the productive and financial sector on record. But the government did not stop there. From tomorrow, August 1st, 2023, the cost of birth, marriage, and death certificates will be $20. That's a 200% increase. Fellow Dominicans, the government has even blamed the people of Dominica with the claim that participants of their pre-budget consultation, quote, recommended increases in the tax on alcohol and tobacco to assist government in maintaining the health system, and that government has obliged by increasing the quote excise tax rates on alcohol and tobacco by 25 cents per litre and per kilogram respectively. So effective September 1, 2023, it will cost us more to CO. It will cost us more to free up when it was the government that created the CO, cool out, free up, and freeness environments. In other words, government set us up so that they could turn around and tax us. Government could also tax Dominicans more. That's their plan. They plan to tax Dominicans more on money transfers through money transfer services businesses such as Western Union, MoneyGram, and JN Money Transfers. Taxes making ding dang in Dominica. Tax in, out, left, right, center, everywhere is tax. Fellow Dominicans, government is taking credit for doing the basics. There are certain things that a government must do. So tooting of the horns on basic achievements, it is a sign that the government only engages in basic programs. Whilst it is true that certain important projects which have been mentioned, we will wait with patient optimism to see. We note that the positive mention was made of the international airport and that the prospect of economic flourishing is endless. That again is a wait and see promise. So far, there is very little sign that this project will yield any sort of extravagant bonks. As a project of this magnitude, it should have been realized at this stage. Probably the minister representing the Wesley constituency is not aware of the many trucks parked in his area. I continue. Fellow Dominicans, in case you missed it, government continues to blame Hurricane Maria, Tropical Storm Erica, and COVID-19 for what the minister refers to as the scars from the shocks that have remained. But we know this is absurd. Our government is devoid of visionary ideas to lift Dominica and her people. We need progressive ideas to inspire the people. So let me revisit our 2022-2023 budget response to assist. We announced that a TUD government would provide subsidies or tax breaks to private corporations, especially for their support of sports, education, culture, agriculture, housing, healthcare, and the information technology. Giving is indeed better than taking. We also said that TUD would go on an all-out campaign to recruit new and younger farmers through the Smart Business label. This label would be introduced as a futuristic and very profitable way of doing agribusiness. New and more youthful farmers will be provided with all the incentives, training, farmlands, farm assets and inputs, housing, technical and logistical support, and a ready market supported by a national distribution center for fish, agriculture, and other locally produced goods. If government had done this, money would have already been flowing in the economy. Fellow Dominicans, when a government should be putting money in our hands, the government is taken away from us. A TUD government would entice Dominicans residing abroad to return and invest in our country by providing lucrative incentives. In our 2022-2023 budget response, we said that a special citizenship trust will be created to raise 1.8 billion for the direct injection into the economy by the beginning of 2023-2024. So had this been done, the revenue stream would come from a specially designed component of the Citizenship by Investment CBI program. It would be open and flowing into Dominica's economy. Of course, TUD has already stated that we will remodel the CBI as a completely transparent and above-board operation, and a plan to relax the over-reliance of CBI as Dominica's main revenue generator would go into effect by 2023-2024 fiscal year. people with interest in progress to join hands with government to help save our country. The plans of this government could wreck Dominica's economy, and the gamble of going it alone is too much of a risk to take. The only way out is for all hands to be on deck. We will reserve our other plans and ideas until then, but it is time to implement the rescue plan. It is time for national salvation. This is urgent. Let us put hands and minds together in the interest of Dominica. I thank you.